Today I'm going to show you how to knit a beautiful chunky lace scarf. This is a great pattern for beginner knitters who've mastered the basics of knitting and are looking for a new challenge. This video includes timestamps in the description to help you navigate through this video. So grab the free pattern in the link in the description and follow along. If you'd like to support this channel, please consider buying a beautiful PDF of this pattern. It's totally optional, but I always appreciate your support. For the price of a coffee in a large metropolitan city, it helps to keep this channel running. Who should knit this scarf? Before you start this pattern, you should be comfortable casting on, knitting, purling, and casting off. In this video, you will learn how to yarn over, knit two together, keep your lace organized, make a fringe, and block your scarf. You'll need 6 balls of Lana Grossa Ragazza lei in the color 84, or roughly 300 grams of a super bulky weight yarn. You'll also need 1 pair of 12mm needles, a pair of scissors, a measuring tape, and a towel for blocking. So now let's start casting on. So you'll notice that I'm using a pair of circular needles. I'm just going to be knitting flat on these needles. These happen to be the only 12mm needles I have. Okay, so let's get our yarn out. And I'm going to cast on 19 stitches. So I'm going to just use a long tail cast on, make my little slip knot here, and cast on 19 stitches. So if you're not sure how to work the long tail cast on, then check out this video that I've linked down below and up on the top right corner to learn how to cast on with the long tail cast on. All right, so let's get 19 stitches on our needle. All right, so I've got 19 stitches on my needle, and I just want to make a quick note about the needle size. So we're using a 12mm needle, which is very large, much larger than the recommended needles for this yarn, because we are knitting lace. So whenever you knit lace, you're going to be using a needle size that is much bigger than the recommended needle size, because we're going to be making yarn overs in our knitting, and so we want the fabric to be airy and loose, and for those yarn overs to really be nice and big. So with that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so row 1 is actually the wrong side. So we're going to start by slipping 1 purlwise. Now what that means is we're going to take our right needle and instead of purling into the first stitch, right? Or excuse me, purling into the first stitch like this with our yarn up front and purling into that first stitch, what we're going to do is just slip our needle into the first stitch as if we were going to purl it, and then just slip it right off the needle. That's it. Okay, that's a slip 1 purlwise. Then we're going to purl all stitches to the end of row. Okay, so that's pretty easy. We're just going to purl all of our stitches. Now at any point, if you don't know how to do something, I will link the technique in the description of the video, or I'll throw it up in the top right corner so that you can reference the technique if you need more practice. So here we go. We're just going to purl all the stitches on this row. All right, so I'm almost near the end of my first row. Here's my last purl stitch. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn my needle over, and now we can work row 2. So row 2 is a right side row, and we start by slipping 1 knitwise. All right, so what this means is we'll take our right needle, slip it into the first stitch as if we were going to knit, right? But we're not actually going to knit that stitch. We're just going to slip our needle in and then drop the stitch over to our right needle, okay? So that's a slip 1 knitwise. All right, so now things get a little interesting. We're going to do what's called a yarn over, or a YO for short. So we're going to bring our yarn up to the front. Okay, that's all that a yarn over is. Bring your yarn up to the front. Okay, that's it. So before our yarn was like this, and we're going to swing our yarn up. That's a yarn over. Okay, so next we're going to do what's called an SSK, also known as a slip, slip, knit. Okay, so what this means is we're going to take our right needle, we're going to bring it into the next stitch as if we were going to knit. Okay, so when we knit a stitch, we go like this, right? So we're going to slip this stitch off. Okay, so slip, and we're going to do another slip on this stitch. So I'm going to bring my needle into that stitch as if I were going to knit it, but I'm not going to knit it, I'm going to slip it. Okay, so we've just slipped 2 stitches, these 2 stitches, right? And then we're going to knit, okay? So I'm going to take my left needle and go into the 2 stitches that I just slipped. Okay, I'm sliding it into these 2 stitches in the front. Okay, you can see it's right in the front. So it's not in the back like this. Okay, we're going into the front of these two slipped stitches, just like this. And you'll notice that the yarn over is right here, okay? And now we're going to knit into these two stitches. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the back, to the front, right? Just like we're knitting, and then just knit into those two slip stitches. And that, my friend, is an SSK, or a slip knit. So an SSK is basically a decrease. It's a left leaning decrease. You can see that the stitch right here is kind of leaning towards the left, right? Okay, so that's an SSK. Okay, so next we're going to do a knit one, easy enough. And we're gonna do a knit two together. And that just means we're gonna take our right needle, slip it into these two stitches on our left needle, just like this, push it in, and then knit into two of them. Okay, there we go. And that is also a right slanting decrease, okay? All right, now we're going to do a yarn over again. So we're gonna bring our yarn to the front. That's all that a yarn over is. And then we're going to knit one. There we go. Okay, so that is the repeat for row 2. So now it says we're going to repeat from the asterisk, which is right back to the beginning of the yarn over. And we're just gonna repeat that to the end of the row. Okay, so let's do that again. We're going to bring our yarn to the front, and that is our yarn over. Then we're going to slip knit, SSK. Okay, so I'm gonna push the stitches up a little bit closer to the needle tips, and I'm gonna take my right needle, bring it into the first stitch as if to knit, and then just slip it off. Okay, that's our first slip. Then I'm gonna do the same thing to this stitch, bring the needle over, and then as if to knit, and then slip it off. Okay, so now comes the knit part. I'm going to take my left needle and go into those two stitches that I just slipped. I'm going into the front of the stitches, okay? Here you can see into the front. Then I'm going to take the yarn and then knit into those two slipped stitches. And now those two slip stitches have become one stitch, right? This stitch right here. Okay, so that's a SSK, or a slip knit. Now we're going to knit one. There we go. And then do a knit two together, K2tog for short. So I'm gonna bring my needle over, slip them into both of these stitches, right? And then knit into them, okay? And that's another decrease. So two stitches have now become one stitch. All right, then we're gonna do a yarn over. Okay, that's all that a yarn over is. And then a knit one. Here we go. And that is it. Okay, that's it. So we're going to repeat the process all over again. Yarn over, slip knit. So we're going to slip the first stitch as if to knit, slip the second stitch as if to knit, and then bring our needle into those two slip stitches from the front, okay? And then knit into those two slip stitches, and now two slip stitches have become one, okay? Then we're going to knit one. Here we go, knit one, knit two together, so two stitches here. I'm knitting into both of them, just like this. Oof, there we go. Knit into those two stitches have become one. And then the last instruction is a yarn over. So again, our yarn comes to the front of the work, front of the needle, and then we knit into that last stitch, and bada bing, bada boom, we have just completed our second row. All right, so that second row was a little bit complicated, so feel free to go back and rewatch this row 2 portion if you need to. There are a lot of new abbreviations, SSK, knit two together, yarn over, but that is basically row 2. Now row 3 is very simple. It's basically identical to row 1. So what we're gonna do is slip one purlwise. So we're going to bring our needle to the back of our work, okay? Or excuse me, bring the yarn to the front of the work, and then insert our needle into the first stitch as if we were gonna purl. So from the top to the bottom, right? And we're not gonna purl, we're actually just going to slip it off, right? Slip one purlwise. There we go, that's it. Okay, that's a slip one purlwise. Then we're just gonna purl all of the stitches to the end of our row. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now, just a little word of warning. When you get to the yarn over, like this, right? This is where we did our yarn over. You'll notice that it's like a big loop, right? There's nothing really holding it in place. And it's okay. You're just going to knit into that little yarn over as if it were just a normal stitch, okay? And those yarn overs are what's going to give us that lacy effect. So you can already see there's a big hole here, right? And that's what's going to make our work look really nice and lacy. So go ahead and purl all of the stitches for row 3. All right, so here's my last purl stitch, and there we go. All right, so now we're going to turn our work over and work row 4. Alrighty, so row 4, we're going to start by slipping 1 knitwise. So sounds familiar, right? We're going to take our needle and slip it into the first stitch on our left needle as if we were going to knit, and then just slip it right off. Okay, so that's a slip 1 knitwise. Then we're going to knit 1. Here we go, knit 1. And now we're back to the yarn over. So we're going to take our yarn, bring it to the front. Okay, and that's pretty much all there is to it. That's a yarn over. Okay, then we're going to slip 2 knitwise. Ooh, this gets interesting. So we're going to take our right needle, slip into the first stitch, okay, as if to knit, and then just slip it off, okay? Slip into the second stitch as if we were going to knit, and then slip it right off, okay? That's it. And then we're going to knit 1. So here we go. We're going to knit 1. Here we go. And then we're going to do something called a P2SSO. Ooh, what does that mean? So P2SSO means that we're going to pass the 2 slip stitches over the next stitch. So these 2 stitches were just slipped, okay? This one and this one. So I'm going to take my left needle, go into these 2 stitches, just like this, okay? And then I'm going to pass them over this stitch. So watch me go. I'm just going to bring it right over. There we go. Pass them over this last stitch that I knit. Okay, and that is a P2SSO. All right, so there we go. So we have just basically decreased 2 stitches. Let's continue on. We're going to bring our yarn over. So bring the yarn over the needle, and then we're going to knit 3. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Great. Okay, so that was the repeat for row 4. All right, so let's do that again. We're going to repeat from the asterisk. So let's move our stitches up front, and we're going to bring our yarn up for a yarn over. Then we're going to slip 2 stitches knitwise. So we're going to insert our needle into the stitch as if to knit, slip it right off, do the same thing to the next stitch, insert it into the stitch, and then slip it right off. And then we're going to knit 1. Here we go, knit 1. And then P2SSO. We're going to pass the 2 slipped stitches over this stitch. Okay, so here are our 2 slipped stitches right here. So I'm going to insert them in my needle into those 2 stitches at the front, and then pass them over this stitch. So here we go. Let's just pass them right over. Bam, perfect. There we go. That's our P2SSO. Then we're going to yarn over, so bring the yarn up front, and then knit 3. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, and 3. Great. There we go. So we're going to repeat this repeat all right, over again. Let's complete the last repeat of row 4 together. So we're going to do a yarn over. So let's bring our yarn to the front. There we go. And then we're going to slip 2 knitwise. So here we go. We're going to insert our needle like this, slip one off, slip the next one off as if we were going to knit, and then we are going to knit 1. So here we go. Our next stitch, we're going to knit into it. Perfect. And then we're going to slip these 2 stitches, these 2 slipped stitches over this stitch. So I'm going to bring my left needle into these 2 stitches and then just literally pass them over that last knit stitch. Here we go. Cool. Then I'm going to bring my yarn to the front for the yarn over, and you'll see that the instruction says that we're going to repeat from the asterisk to the last 2 stitches, and then we're going to knit 2 for the last repeat. So here we go, yarn is up front, and the last repeat we're just going to knit 2. Whoops, there we go, knit 2, and there we go, knit 2. All right, so that is our row 4. So if you've gotten this far, that means that you have completed the entire repeat for this lace pattern. Now we would just repeat rows 1 to 4 until your scarf measures the desired length. So we would go right back to the beginning, row 1, which is turning our needle over, slipping one purlwise, and then purling all of those stitches, right? Bring our needle to the back, slip one as if to purl, and then just purl all of those stitches, okay? So now I'm back to row 1, and you would just work rows 1 to 4. That is your lace pattern repeat. All right, so after a bit of knitting, your scarf will look like this. You'll see these big lacy holes, and these are from the yarn overs that we created. And the SSKs and the Knit2togethers are what's making these interesting shapes along our scarf. So don't worry if your scarf looks a little bit chunky and not very open and beautiful. We are going to block this scarf later on, and that's going to really open up the lace and make the pattern really noticeable. But for now, if your scarf looks like this, then you are on the right track. Now, in order to keep your knitting organized, I would recommend that you write out the 4 rows on a piece of paper. And as you work each row, use a post-it note and then just overline or underline what row you're on. So if you're on row 1, underline row 1 like this. After you've worked row 1, cover it up so that you know that you're on row 2. After you've worked row 2, cover up row 2 so that you know you're on row 3, etc., etc. Now, the knitting is quite easy to read in terms of a right and wrong side. The wrong side looks like this, right? It's kind of purled, whereas the right side looks like this, right? So it's pretty easy to tell the right and the wrong side. Where the tricky part comes in is telling the difference between the 2 right side rows. Row 2 and row 4. So that's why I recommend just keeping your knitting organized and use a post-it note to kind of cover up the rows that you've already worked so that you know what row that you're on. If you purchase the pattern, you can always use the PDF pattern for this. When your scarf is 70 inches or your desired length, then you're ready to cast off. So casting off is pretty easy with this lace pattern. You would just cast off as normal. You can slip the first stitch and knit into the next stitch and then just pass the first stitch over the last stitch. Okay, so pretty simple bind off. Here's a video that I'll link in the description and above if you need a little bit more instruction on how to cast off. Basically, a standard cast off with a loose hand will do. All right, so I'm near the end of my cast off and here we go. So I'm going to get out a pair of scissors. Here we go, and then just cut a length of yarn, bring this over my needle, and then bring the last stitch over that little length of yarn, pull it through, and now it is secure. Awesome. All right, so now it's time to block the scarf. I've got a little tub here that I filled with room temperature water, and I'm just gonna take my little scarf swatch and just drop it right into the water, really kind of submerge it into the water. All right, so the reason why we need to block the scarf is so the scarf can really show off the lace really, really well, and blocking is gonna do that for us, okay? So we're just going to submerge the scarf in this water for about 15 minutes. All right, so it's been 15 minutes, so now I'm just going to take my scarf out and just push out as much water as I can. And yes, I'm just knitting a tiny little swatch of a scarf just for this demo, but of course your scarf is gonna be really, really big. So here I'm just gonna move this out of the way and get out a towel. And I'll just lay my scarf onto this towel. Now for you, if you've got a really huge scarf, then you might need like several towels to really dry it off. So I'm just going to roll it up here and bam, 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 bam. Get as much water out as possible. And now I'm going to lay out the scarf and spread out the lace. Okay, so now you can see that the lace looks actually really nice. It's very open. And now we can pin this in place so that when it dries, it'll dry in this very open way and you can really see the lace shine. Okay, so let's get out some needles and I'm just going to use them to pin my scarf in place so that it stays really nice and open and the scarf is an even width all the way down. And you can use a measuring tape to make sure it's the right width, or you can just eyeball it if you like. I don't need a lot of pins, just a couple to keep the shape of the scarf. All right, so continue to do this across the whole scarf all the way down, and then once you've done this, just leave it alone, let the scarf dry overnight. Okay, so now my scarf has dried and it's so nice and soft. So I'm going to take out the pins and get the scarf off the towel. So I just have a small little piece here, but your scarf will probably be really long and luxurious and going on for days and days. So we can really see the beautiful open lacework now that our scarf is blocked. Okay, so now we're gonna attach the fringe. And you can see the leftover yarn from the long tail cast on here, so we can just leave it on as part of the fringe, no need to cut it off. So we're gonna measure out about 10 inches of yarn for the fringe. I think this is a nice length that gives a good swingy fringe. You can, of course, cut a longer or shorter length if you like. So we'll measure out 3 strands, and I'll use the first strand to measure out the rest of the fringe. Now I'm going to attach this to my scarf. So I'm going to fold the fringe in half like this, and then I'm going to bring out an extra needle. So this is a much smaller needle than what I use to knit the scarf. I find it's a lot easier to attach the fringe using a smaller needle rather than our big 12mm. So I'm going to turn the scarf over so that the wrong side, or the purl side, is facing up. Then I'm going to stick my needle into the top corner, corneriest corner of the scarf. So I'm going to grab the fringe bundle and hook it onto the needle. Then I'm going to grab it and then pull it through to the other side. So I've pulled the fringe bundle through, and now I'm going to put the fringe into this little loop like this, and then pull down and tighten it up. Oh, so I actually want to include this leftover yarn from the cast on, so I'm going to grab it and stuff it into the fringe bundle knot, and then pull everything down. Cool. So let's turn the scarf over to the right side, and now you can see that the fringe has been attached really nicely to the scarf, and there's a long tail here from the cast on, so I'll trim that right off. So we can do a final trim later on when all the fringes are attached. For now, I'll just leave it shaggy. Cool, so let's do that again. I'll cut out 10 inches of yarn, and then 2 more so that I have 3 strands in total. Then I'm going to turn my scarf to the wrong side, and we'll move about an inch over from the first fringe bundle, stick the needle in, grab the fringe and fold it in half. Then I'll hook it onto the needle and pull it through. There we go. So I'll grab the fringe and throw it through the loop, grab everything and pull down. Cool, so we've just attached our second fringe. Okay, so a quick note. When you look at the front, you'll see that both these fringes have identical knots. They look like a smooth little button, whereas when we turn it over, the knot looks quite a bit different. So when we're attaching the fringe, we want to keep the knots on each side identical. You don't want one knot to look like this and another knot to look like this. You want all the fringes to be knotted in the same way on each side. And the way we do that is by attaching the fringe on the same side every time. So for us, that means we're attaching on the wrong side. So continue knotting our fringe bundles across the scarf on the wrong side until you reach the other side of the scarf. So all my fringe has been attached and it looks so cute and swingy. So let's turn it over and see our fringe in all its glory. And wow, it looks amazing if I do say so myself. It's so fluffy, I love it. Now you can see that the fringe is a little bit raggedy. It's not a perfect straight edge. So what we can do is comb it out so that all the fringe lays flat. Then we can carefully trim across the fringe, just eyeballing a straight line and cut it straight. Now it looks so nice and even. You can do a bit of fine tuning and trim a bit more, but I'm really happy with it. So you can repeat the process on the other end of the scarf. Then you can wear this scarf out into the world. Super cute, so adorable. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome lace scarf that you can wear out and swing around. If you like this video, then please give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this one, then subscribe and ring that bell to be notified of new videos. Let me know if you're going to make this scarf, and if you do, what color you would choose to knit with. I'm Tavina from sheepandstitch.com. Thanks for watching, happy knitting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!